It's the Ray Powers Hour, back on the line, with one of the most unique and innovative musicians of his time. PBS has called him the Les Paul of the violin world. He's a native New Yorker, and his body of work, well, I can go on forever with his credentials, but that would be rude because I've got him here on the line, and he can tell you himself. Please give a Ray Powers Hour welcome to violin and music extraordinaire, Mark Wood. How you doing, buddy?
That was one of the best intros I've ever had. Thank you, Ray. I'm doing great. Thank you for inviting me, man. I'm all yours.
I'm old school. I used to watch Mike Douglas, and I used to watch Johnny Carson. I learned from the best.
Great.
The Gen Zs are going, Mike Douglas, who's that?
I remember him.
Well, we're not Gen Z, I hate to tell you.
I know.
We're not even Gen Y or whatever came before us. But
oh man, yeah, no clue.
No. So my God, I don't even know where to start with you. You're Juilliard trained. You've won Emmys. Your patent for the electric violin has been officially recognized as the most important change to the instrument in 400 years. Hence the honor to being compared to Les Paul. What's that like? Is that surreal, or do you even what is that like?
Well, Ray, and thank you, by the way. I never really think, and like you as a creative person, we don't really think about what we are achieving. We're just doing it. Every day we're doing it. We're, hitting the ground running every day, composing, writing music, inventing, being creative. So I don't ever really think about it. And when you put it in those terms, as you just did so eloquently, it is, as I pause for seconds, I pause and go, wow, that was pretty cool ride and what we've achieved. So, yeah, I think that I'm just, I don't even think we're lucky. This is just what we do. Right. We write music, we tour, we perform, we invent, and all of the work that I've done with my electric violins has purely been, nobody's doing it, so I got to do it. There's nothing out there when I was growing up. Nothing. They considered an electric violin an acoustic violin painted blue with a pickup. That was what they used to call an electric violin. And I'd, go listen to Hendrix and Van Halen. That they're all solid body instruments. That was a big shift for me to go, well, man, I got to build one that's solid body. Maybe that, and of course that evolved into a whole industry right now that we lead. And it's, and again, Ray, we have to find the keys to our the front door every day of what art we're working on. I have 8 full-time employees. I'm running a business here,
right?
So we can't be too spaced out and heads in the clouds, which we are. But there are certain times when mortgages due and bills are paid, and we got to pay bills. And this pandemic, for both of us, really was a shock to the system for over a year, and it's not over yet. So we have to also maintain a resilience that enables us to continue functioning in a healthy mental capacity, and that's hard for creative people. So I think that the challenge is not only coming up with the ideas and implementing them, but how do you keep them going for 30 to 40 years? Right. That's where it separates people,
Yeah, I was going to touch on that, but since you brought it up, you have an unmatched educational outreach program where you bring music to literally hundreds of schools, maybe thousands. And with schools all but virtual at the moment, how are you getting music to these schools?
Yes, Ray, exactly. A year ago, we were stuck in Phoenix, Arizona. We had full concerts with a large private school, full choir, full band, full string section. We've been rehearsing, and then it shut down. And some part of my work is mentoring at schools, and I love it. And it's a valuable experience for our responsibility to get our audiences educated, because I'm seeing that 10-year-old, that 15-year-old kid as a future audience member. I want them to be somewhat sophisticated with how they think about music. And in music school, in music classes at a public school, that's the epicenter. And of course, public schools is a critical element of our culture and our society in America. We have to support it. There's a lot of challenges, a lot of underprivileged students that we run to because that's where you find interesting talent, and equally important, this is what it's like to play music. And this is the kind of way to master an instrument and your music, and this is how you do it. So it's been very, very gratifying for 22 years now. And and by the way, Ray, I've never had any interest after Juilliard ever to walk into a school again. Yuck. I had no interest. You know, for 20 years, I left Juilliard and I started playing in rock bands, and then I, got a record deal, and my career was flourishing. I was doing the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and out of nowhere, a high school director comes up to me and asks me to put together a Trans-Siberian Orchestra in her high school orchestra program in Cleveland. And, I was hemming and hawing, but the second I walked in and was collaborating with teenagers, collaborating with fresh thinking, it was explosive and fascinating and invigorating for myself and the students. And we have, that's when it started. And now we do about 150 schools a year, and we have about, 30 or 40 electric orchestra programs that incorporate my instruments, technology, my music, my arrangements. We go into concerts, and the music program, Ray, starts when I arrive with 20 kids. After 5 years of going to a particular district, it's up to 400 kids who are participating in the music programs. That's the win. Totally, that's the win.
Absolutely. This is the Ray Powers Hour on the line with violinist, absolute musician extraordinaire, Mark Wood. And I first saw you live with TSO, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, back in, it had to be 1990-something, 97 maybe, when you guys were still at, like, the Beacon Theater and packing theaters. And, of course, now it's exploded into this monster. But being a rock fan already, I had been familiar with you. But you're so versatile, and while the violin has become a crossover instrument, that's thanks in large part to you.
Thank you.
So, like, when you walk into a school, and they know who you are, and they have a little bit of a preface, and you walk in with this electric violin, are you finding kids still listening to Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin and Kiss, and they want this big bombastic, like, are they really excited to mix rock and, orchestral music?
Right. Great question, Ray. And what we have discovered is that a lot of these kids know who Led Zeppelin is. They know who the Beatles are. And I ask them, how do you know Led Zeppelin? They say, my dad plays it all the time. So The generations, they're not my parents. My parents did not grow up on rock and roll.
Right.
My parents were listened to classical music and Broadway show tunes, so sort of. When Elvis Presley and the Beatles came out, that shook the world so fiercely that within, 10 years? Just 10 years in history, it was similar to like Paris in the early 1900s with Stravinsky, Picasso, Ravel, Debussy. For a small amount of time, there was an incredible fertile ground of creativity, and that was my childhood, growing up with that. It was really a powerful experience of being around that kind of music. And then all of a sudden, years later, I'm working with kids and we're doing Kashmir. We're doing Eleanor Rigby. And I get to chat with them. And by the way, for better or for worse, these kids don't listen to classical music. So I don't know what they're expecting when they join orchestra. But, none of them really listen to it. So I come in and said, okay, this is what you can also do with the violin, cello, and bass. And that's when we open up their imaginations. And by the way, their teachers, collaborating with the teachers is also critical, and doing teacher training. A lot of the teachers are steeped in very, very traditional, hundreds years old pedagogy that just does not apply as much. Some of it, yes, but not all of it for the future generations of kids. You have to engage these kids on a different level now. The attention spans are five minutes, We have
Yeah.
5 minutes with these kids. And
Right.
if they get bored, they're gone. So we got to come in there with a lot of bells and whistles. So we really enjoy it. We have about 10 artist mentors that we fly out, from band people, electric trombone player people, choir people, singers. It's really become an awesome outreach for our educational programs.
Yeah, you make a great point there with keeping kids engaged. I mean, I'm in the music ministry in my church, which is a pretty conservative Catholic church, but we've infused a lot of CCM and a lot of, contemporary music. There's a bass, there are drums, there are guitars, and, it's one song, it's definitely, it's reverent, but, it's keeping up with the times. Like you said, Picasso was the turn of the century then. And
right.
And if everybody, the stodgy people were like, you can't do this. And, Picasso, are you kidding? But
right.
That's the whole thing is if you want to keep culture moving forward, you have to be able to at least give a little and move with the times. You can keep and embrace, the classical quality, but
oh, absolutely, yeah.
Fashions change. It's inevitable.
But, Ray, what's also interesting that I really love, just by accident, I grew up in a musical family with string quartets and classical music, and working with Leonard Bernstein and being mentored by him when I was 15 years old, and then going to Juilliard. Man, I'm surrounded by the highest level of musicians, the absolute highest level. But I'm also listening to John Lennon. I'm listening to Duane Allman. I'm listening to the Allman Brothers. I'm listening to Miles Davis. I'm listening to, all of that music and putting them on the same plane as Mahler and Brahms. The problem is that the conservatories, unfortunately, do not recognize the same impact and same sophistication that music had to their classical thing. So that's another challenge, and probably another conversation someday,
right,
is the collision of old school, new school. You know what? A story comes to my mind. I'm a huge fan of Steve Jobs, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget in the book he wrote that he and Bill Gates, when they were just out of Harvard and Stanford, they had a meeting with IBM Computers. And they went in, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates said, let's put together a personal computer. And IBM said, oh, hell no, we aren't going to do that. We're not interested at all. No one's going to want a personal computer. And that always rings in my mind when I'm talking to administrators or pedagogists or academics who are steeped in that tradition, saying, we don't think like that. Stravinsky doesn't think like that. Great composers always reinvent. And we can't get stuck in the academia of it, because that will ruin us. And, of course, that's really what's occurring right now. A cultural shift is going faster than we've ever seen it with the Internet, with downloading music, with concerts. Man, we're going through a really I think it's exciting. I think that you're probably experiencing it, too. There's no record industry.
Yeah.
There's no industry really to sell music to make a living like it was 25 years ago. You didn't have to tour, man. Mariah Carey would just cash her checks, man. She didn't have to go on tour. But right now, guess what? We're on tour, and that's all the income there is.
Yeah, and a lot of artists feel bad that they have to charge for, the pre-party, the after-party, but it's literally the only thing left to make any money, the merchandise and everything else. And even then, if you're signed to a record deal, it's part of a 360 where they're taking a piece of that too. So you're not even getting the full nut of that.
And also, Ray, what has been exciting for independent musicians like myself, who I've signed to management, I've signed to lawyers, I've signed to record companies, and it's always been a trap and always been a zero-sum money.
Yep.
Once I have formed my own record company, once I formed my own management company, once I formed my own publishing company, and I own everything, working 24/7, by the way, like everybody, other musician, at least I know that I can control my destiny. When these record companies drop these bands, what are they going to do?
Right.
Gone.
Exactly.
So, and Frank Zappa was one of my heroes, and he was the perfect and the first really musician to have his own record company, own his own publishing, and that was, the game changer.
Absolutely. Well, speaking about working for yourself, tell us about the Wood Violins shop.
Yes, I'm very proud of it. And briefly, we are on Long Island. I have a wood shop out on Long Island. I've got 5 full-time employees of luthiers who build these instruments from scratch. And, it's funny, with the pandemic, I didn't lay off anybody. And we have like a 1.5-year waiting list for my instruments now. And, it takes a little bit of time. We build 6-string, 7-strings, fretted, fretless. We build 5-string, 4-strings. We build cellos. We build probably far more products than my luthiers want to deal with. But, it's really exciting to walk over to my to my wood shop, and plug in a brand new Viper, which is my instrument's called the Viper, and play it for the first time. And then showed my luthiers these incredible, from Lindsey Sterling to Mark O'Connor, check out these videos of these players playing my instrument who are just killing it. It's just very powerful for me on the sidelines to watch, going, wow, that person's really doing something different on my invention. That's a powerful experience for some of me. Because remember, guitar, when was the guitar innovated? It's always had 6 strings, it always has had frets, and you always strummed it. There's really been very little innovation with musical instruments, except maybe the synthesizer.
Right.
And of course, recording gear. But for the violin world, zero. And it never really occurred to me that I was the only one, but I just did it anyway. And lo and behold, 25, 30 years later, we own a big piece of this territory, and it's very exciting.
Yeah, it probably actually helped you with all these people at home because, everybody bought Pro Tools. Everybody went out and ordered musical instruments and gym equipment. So in a lot of ways, fortuitously, you were on the right side of this, and a lot of people, unfortunately, weren't. But, the restaurant industry was hit or miss. But as far as people learning, this is the only time I'm going to get to learn an instrument with this amount of time. The only thing more valuable than air is time.
Exactly. So, that's one of the benefits of what's happening. But it's still really an interesting moment for us as a violin company. I'm really seeing more and more people playing our instruments, and it's mind-blowing, totally mind-blowing.
Absolutely. I had a couple of selfish questions, and I hope that my audience will, endure me as they always do when I geek out. But when you first played a so-called electric violin, hollow body with a pickup, what was the impetus? Was it just the thing feeding back just mercilessly, and you said, I have to do something about this? But
Ray, remember, I grew up watching Van Halen, Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, but the list is a mile long of my influences. All of my influences were guitar players.
Right.
Because the guitar players were doing these virtuoso stuff. Yngwie Malmsteen, you remember that whole scene in the 90s and 80s with Motley Crue. If your guitar player wasn't virtuoso, you'd be fired. And I just happened to be right place, right time with my virtuoso heavy metal violin. And seeing an acoustic violin with a pickup just seemed like I was on Hee Haw, that TV program. It just made me feel like, am I a fiddler? What's going on? I'm a heavy metal violin player. So what does that instrument look like? Well, that does not look like an acoustic. It's like Jimi Hendrix trying to do his thing at Woodstock with an acoustic guitar. Right. There is no possible way. So with a violin player, it's like, man, I think I could do it with solid body. And then, of course, all of my inventions. Sometime you got to come view my performance that I do on Zoom. I have all of my instruments displayed, and I go through each one as I invented one and then changed something and then invented the second version and then the third version and then moved the neck a little bit this way. And then after 3 years, discovering the self-supporting and getting my patent. I mean, the evolution is just so amazing to me to watch how I went from Juilliard violin acoustic to a double neck, flying V with a barrel at the end of it with, painted purple. How did that happen? I have no clue.
Well, I don't play violin. I do play bass, but this is...
Yes, you do.
I do. But
really well.
Well, thank you. That's high praise coming from you. But out of total ignorance, do the purists consider it heresy to add frets to your violins, or is it just understood that you're working with something that unique?
Another hot topic button, Ray. I have a bookload of experiences with the pushback of the old guard.
I would figure.
And it drives me nuts because guitar players don't have to suffer from that. Saxophone players, you're either into John Coltrane or so. Keyboard players, they got organ, they got harpsichord, they got synthesizers, drums. Everybody has it really easy except string players. String players go through this hyper tradition that is almost heresy when you go outside it. And of course, I'm exaggerating, but about, when I was growing up in the 70s, it was very much like that. I was totally the oddball. Now it's a little bit less, but it is definitely, it sort of amuses me because at this point we're selling so many instruments, so many people are now finally playing. It's unfortunate the backlash is making the acoustic violin less interesting because it hasn't changed in 400 years, less interesting as something that's coming that's new. The guitar players, you as a bass player, how fast do you run if there's a Sam Ash or a Guitar Center to a new pedal, a new device, a new amp, a new bass? Where is it? The violin world does not have that. We run after instruments that were built 400 years ago for millions of dollars. That's our industry. And you can talk to these dealers. What's the difference between a $200,000 violin and a $500,000 violin? And they can't answer you. So it's a complex world as a tradition that is steeped in, of course, Vivaldi, Beethoven, Mozart, Brahms, and all the greatest composers in history wrote for our instrument, except everybody has been afraid to move it in a different direction until I came along. I'm telling you, Ray, there was nobody in the 70s. Can you name an electric violin player back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s? Could you do that?
Not a one.
Not one. How many guitar players can you name?
You have a week. I could sit here. We could sit here and make a list. It could be an encyclopedia,
right? With the innovation of Hendrix going to Clapton, going to Van Halen. I mean, unbelievable. So here I am. Where do I fit in? And people will come up, Mark, why don't you just play guitar? I said, I'm not going to play guitar, man. I'm a violin player. I could do it with a bow. And lo and behold, I can do it better. How's that?
The only one that might come even close in the stratosphere might be Edgar Winter when he decided to patent the keytar. But even that. Yes. But again, the keytar actually keyboards have been around since the harpsichord. It's been around as long as the violin. But the keyboard world has always been flexible, going from church organs to regular pianos to harpsichords to claviers. So keyboard players always had an assortment. Right.
But string players had no assortment.
No.
One thing, that's it. 4 strings, and that's it. I was the first person to build a 5-string, then I built a 6, and then I finally built a 7. Hopefully someday we can meet, or I can do a Zoom with you. I'd love to play for you, and for you to see how I can manipulate that instrument into pushing it further than you can imagine of a violin going.
I could see Long Island from my roof, so you just name the day and I'll be out there. That's awesome.
Someday we got to hook up, man.
That's a promise. Now, you have a fairly recent single in video, Fire and Ice. Was that filmed out in the desert?
Yes, that was filmed in the Mojave Desert a couple of years ago, and it was really fun. It was right before, the NAMM show in California. We did it right after the NAMM show, and I drove my band out there, and we did a film shoot there. Yeah, that's a very special video for me because my kid is on drums, Elijah.
Wow. He is absolutely on fire in that video.
Oh, a monster, and he's now Shania Twain's drummer, and yeah, it's pretty powerful.
You know, it looked really hot to be rocking a duster.
That was fun, man. It was fun.
Had to be. Well, with your permission, I would love to play Fire and Ice for everybody listening. And is there anything you could tell me about the song before you play it?
Yes, I wanted a purely instrumental with strong melodies, but the melodies are played with distortion, yet the verses are on a clean electric sound. So it varies with my wah-wah pedal, so it really showcases the audible depth and tonality of my instrument.
Well, let's give it a run. This is Mark Wood with his recent single, Fire and Ice, on your number one show for new music all over the world, The Ray Powers Hour. Your number one show for new music all over the world and beyond, The Ray Powers Hour. Mark Wood with Fire and Ice. I told you, it's scorching. My board just caught fire. That's a great song. You know, it's really, really, I don't want to say odd, it's very interesting. Instrumentalists really have a challenge in delivering a hook because you don't have lyrics to relay the message. It relies all on a catchy melody.
That's right. That's right. And luckily I married a singer so that anytime I do need lyrics and a vocal, I just knock on the door next to me, and that's where my wife lives with me. So, yeah, I really set up a life where I was collaborating with a lot of people as an instrumentalist. But Ray, there, definitely without being able to sing, I have to figure that out how to do my instrument because I can't sing at all. Just do it on your instrument.
Absolutely. Well, I think you'll get a pass, being that you made a little bit of a dent in the music world. I think we can forgive you for not being the next Pavarotti.
You're right.
But I could talk to you all night, but tell everybody where to go to listen to Mark Wood. Give them the shop, give them the URL, the music stuff, anything you want to put out there. Tell them what to go to first.
Oh, thank you so much, Ray, for this opportunity. Mark Wood TV is my YouTube channel. I think we're up to 6 million plus views there. And Instagram is Mark Wood Experience. Facebook is Mark Wood Music. And then we have electrifyyoursymphony.com, our website that really gets into depth about our programs for bookings and master classes. We're all on Zoom the last year, so it's been pretty intense.
Right.
I did 8 master classes today, and my voice is shot. But it's really interesting to teach about 200 young musicians every 30 minutes with a 5-minute break. I'm traveling from Cincinnati to San Antonio to California to Florida, all in one day without going near an airport and not having to put any shoes on. It's great, but it's bizarre. It's very bizarre.
That part of it is great, if not a little surreal, absolutely.
Yes.
What an amazing life. I'll tell you, one of a kind, Mark Wood. Go check him out. Mark, thank you so much. We will get together soon.
Oh, thank you, Ray.
Thank you, buddy.
The Ray Powers Hour.